Coming up on the program, heavy casualties reported on the outskirts of central Afghanistan in Afghanistan following the withdrawal of U.S. troops from the country. New Israeli government fails to pass an extension to a controversial law barring Palestinians from the occupied West Bank. Plus, the UK announces changes to its COVID-19 rules. A warm welcome to the program. I'm Joke Rogers. We continue to monitor the security situation in Afghanistan following the foreign troops' withdrawal from the country over the weekend. Just today, we've learned of heavy casualties inflicted on the Taliban following airstrikes and ground attacks by Afghan security forces on the outskirts of Faizabad city. Faizabad is the capital of the northern province of Badashkan, which borders Tajikistan, from where the Afghan servicemen fled on Sunday after the Taliban made rapid territorial gains. Afghan security personnel who fled into Tajikistan are being brought back to rejoin the fight against Taliban insurgents. The crossings have raised alarm in Afghanistan's northern Central Asian neighbors. On Monday, Tajikistan, a former Soviet republic, ordered the mobilization of 20,000 military reservists to bolster the border with Afghanistan. And we're also learning more on the way and manner American troops left Bagram airfield, a key base in Afghanistan, from where they have operated for years. Base Commander General Abdulsalaj Kostani says troops left at 3 a.m. local time on Friday, and that the Afghan military found out hours later. The Bagram airfield contained a prison currently holding up to 5,000 Taliban prisoners. Now that the foreign troops are gone, Afghan forces expect the Taliban, which has been advancing rapidly in the country, to attack Bagram. The U.S. announced on Friday that it had vacated Bagram, effectively completing its military campaign in Afghanistan ahead of the official end date of September 11, as announced by President Joe Biden earlier this year. And it's been about 20 years of conflict involving American troops against the Taliban in Afghanistan. Conflict that stemmed from the 9/11 attacks on the United States, led by al-Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden, now deceased. It was the largest terror attack ever conducted on U.S. soil. America hit back with its first airstrikes on Taliban and al-Qaeda facilities in Afghanistan 1 month after 9/11, targeting Kabul, the Afghan capital, Kandahar, and Jalalabad. The Taliban refused to hand over bin Laden. Well, security analyst David Otto joins us now from London. David.
Thank you.
So what do you make of the way and manner in which the U.S. troops left Bagram with no information to the Afghan forces?
I think it's very shocking, Amarachi. Of course, there should have been an agreement in terms of timing, but I suppose the Afghan government, in some way or form, may have been informed, or somehow, if they were quite alert, they should have known that, the U.S. is going to leave before the deadline of September 11, which was set. I mean, this, again, as you mentioned, is the anniversary of the 9/11 attacks. So what we've seen now is similar to perhaps a strategic exit, which, the U.S. may have tried to avoid what they experienced in Vienna in 1975, when they announced that they were leaving. A lot of the communist North, launched attacks on the day that the U.S. was meant to leave. And this appeared as if the U.S., was being chased away by the communist North. So I think the lessons of 1975, may have been applied here. Of course, the U.S. did make it very clear that September 11 would be the date of evacuation. But what they did was to leave before that date in order not to have the same embarrassment, I think, that they had during the time in Vietnam. So maybe lessons learned, maybe not.
And so this brings to an end the U.S. 20-year support to the Afghan government and its involvement in the war. What lessons do you think may have been learned from this conflict?
I think one of the lessons is that, people don't usually respond well. Countries don't respond well to being bombed, being invaded, and being occupied by foreign nations. Of course, the 9/11 attack was devastating to Americans. The United States, had to do something because of course, they couldn't prevent those attacks from happening. And they went there for 5 reasons. I mean, they said they wanted to remove the Taliban from power, which they succeeded in doing so. But what they did not succeed was to eliminate the Taliban altogether. They wanted to destroy Al-Qaeda. But after 20 years, Al-Qaeda is still there. Al-Qaeda has now given birth to the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, which is known as ISIS. So we have a multiplication of terrorist activities globally. They wanted to liberate women who were oppressed in Afghanistan at the time. But that hasn't changed because the Taliban is coming back and it is sticking to its principles. They wanted to send a clear message to deliver democracy. But the government in Kabul is not capable of holding power because right now, about 160 of the 400 districts in Afghanistan has now been taken over by the Taliban. And they insist that, they would either rule by force or have a powerful negotiation bargain with the Afghan government. So I think eliminating Osama bin Laden is the only success that the US achieved because, of course, he was the mastermind of 9/11, but other leaders have taken over from him.
And so, David, how much of an impact do you think a U.S. presence has made in the region?
I think there has been some level of impact, but look at the amount of money that was spent, trillions of dollars. The United Kingdom, for example, spent almost 40 billion pounds in the war. They lost about 500 soldiers. Many more were wounded. There are statistics that show that the US spent 3.3 billion, and much more. I mean, this is just the official figure. We've got an improvement, of course, in terms of the security aid which is being given to the Afghan government. We have some economic aid which has been given, political support. But all this is going to crumble when the Taliban returns to power. So I think what I see here is a very big lesson for each country to learn. Afghanistan, is the graveyard of empires. Remember the Greeks, the Orthodox Greeks went there, they collapsed. The Mongols went to Afghanistan, they couldn't succeed. The British couldn't succeed. The Soviet Union couldn't succeed. And now the US cannot succeed. So I think launching what we call, a vague glorious revolutions has been one of the defaults, of many of these countries. But what the way forward, for me, I believe, is to always ensure that the local population is bought in when these kind of invasions happen. Let the people deal with their issues. Do not take in democracy to a country that doesn't want to practice democracy, because at the end of the day, they have the time and you have the clock.
Right, thanks again, David, for your thoughts on that. And this was Joke speaking to you, not Amarachi, but thanks again.
Thank you, Tope.
So let's continue. The United Kingdom has outlined changes to the coronavirus rules, which cover school and self-isolation. Among the rules, the system of sending classroom buddies home after a positive case will stop at the end of the summer term. The need for face masks, social distancing, and staggered start and finish times will also end. And COVID testing regime for pupils will be transferred to the NHS and trace system. Also from August 16, anyone who is a close contact of someone who tests positive for COVID-19 will no longer have to self-isolate if they are fully vaccinated. Instead, adults who have been in close contact with a positive case will be advised to get a PCR test as soon as possible. However, those who have a second vaccine dose close to August 16 must wait 2 weeks after the jab before following the new rules. Here's the global update.
Global Update continues in Côte d'Ivoire, which has begun deploying mobile clinics after setting an ambitious target of vaccinating 1 million people against COVID-19 over the next 10 days. The country's mobile clinics were rolled out on Monday, July 5th, heading for busy parts of the capital, Abidjan, such as markets. Fewer than 800,000 shots have been administered since vaccinations began in March. Over in the French capital, Paris, tourists, mainly from Europe and the United States, have returned, offering a glimmer of hope for businesses that rely on the influx of travelers to one of the world's most visited cities. The flow of tourists to Paris, many of them from Asia and the United States, dried up almost completely last year when the COVID-19 pandemic struck and governments around the world imposed travel restrictions. With infections falling, France is gradually easing restrictions. Japan is preparing to ship millions more doses of the AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine to Asian neighbors this week, in continuation of bilateral donations. Japan will send around 1.13 million more doses to Taiwan on Thursday. According to Foreign Minister Toshimitsu Motegi, a further 1 million doses each will be sent to Thailand, the Philippines and Vietnam this week, following earlier donations to Indonesia and Malaysia. Managing Director at Gavi, Aurelia Guyen, says the COVAX dose sharing facility expects to have 1.9 billion doses of COVID-19 vaccines available by the end of the year, including 1.5 billion earmarked for the poorest countries. It expects a very strong increase in COVID-19 vaccine availability towards the fourth quarter.
Well, staying with the global pandemic, our correspondent in Washington, Maria Bird, reports on how COVID-19 impacted on the July 4th celebrations.
The U.S. celebrated its Independence Day as it claimed its independence from COVID-19, which has been a struggle for the U.S. for over 16 months.
245 years ago, we declared our independence from a distant king. Today, we are closer than ever to declaring our independence from a deadly virus. My fellow Americans, it's the most patriotic thing you can do. So please, if you haven't gotten vaccinated, do it. Do it now. For yourself, for your loved ones, for your community, and for your country. While the virus hasn't been vanquished, we know this: it no longer controls our lives. It no longer paralyzes our nation.
President Biden set an ambitious goal of 70% of all adults being vaccinated in the U.S. This goal was slightly missed as just over 67% of adults in the U.S. are vaccinated.
We think it'll take a few extra weeks to get to 70% of all adults with at least one shot, with the 18 to 26-year-olds factored in.
The new strands of the coronavirus are also creating a high alert for Americans.
We are not done until we completely crush this outbreak. We seem, as was the case with B117, we seem to be following the pattern with the Delta variant, with a doubling time of about 2 weeks. If you look from the May 8th with 1.2 to 2.7, to 9.9, and as of a couple of days ago, 20.6% of the isolates are Delta. Similar to the situation in the UK, the Delta variant is currently the greatest threat in the US to our attempt to eliminate COVID-19.
The U.S. has made major progress in the fight against COVID and hope to reach herd immunity in the near future. From Washington, Maria Bird, Channel Television News.
Still ahead on the world today. Denmark can proudly say it hosts the world's tallest sandcastle. Stay with us for more on this on the world today. Welcome back to the program. Tropical storm Elsa is said to have exited Cuba and is right in the Florida Straits. Weather conditions are expected to worsen as heavy rain and wind is also expected.
Elsa was over the Florida Straits earlier today. and is expected to move towards the west coast of the state after dumping heavy rain over Cuba. The U.S. Hurricane Center said in its latest advisory that center of Elsa was moving towards the northwest near 12 miles per hour. Satellite data indicated maximum sustained winds were near 60 miles per hour with stronger gusts. The storm comes as the death toll from a collapsed Miami area building rose to 28 on Monday after the controlled demolition of the remainder of the building on Sunday night enabled rescuers to expand their search. Elsa was making its way from Cuba, where it made landfall on Monday, before it began plowing through the island nation on track for Florida after causing at least 3 deaths elsewhere in the Caribbean. Authorities in Cuba say Elsa, which was moved northwest at 22 kilometers per hour, had sustained winds peaking near 95 miles per hour. Storm surges affected Cuba's southern coast, while parts of the country experienced strong rain and winds. More than 100 people were evacuated in Cuba from flood-prone areas or unsafe housing in the potential path of the storm, most going to homes of family and friends, but thousands also got to government shelters.
Well, last month, news emerged that Nigerians in Sharjah in the United Arab Emirates got into a bloody fight that ended in multiple deaths. It's still unclear how it happened, but it was reported that it was a fight between 2 rival cult groups and some innocent Nigerians were caught up in it. Footage was, however, released, reportedly showing a group armed with machetes arriving at an apartment complex where they kicked open a door and went on to attack the occupants. Other videos showed the aftermath of the attack, with the mutilated bodies lying on the floor of a narrow hallway, and injured men with blood dripping down their bodies could also be seen. Well, Channel Television's Dubai correspondent Mayowa Adogoke joins us now for more on the story. Mayowa, good to see you.
It's good to see you as well.
So what's the update on the cultist story, and what has the Dubai government said about it?
There's been no official statement on this matter from the Dubai government, the Dubai police, as well as the Sharjah police. However, if we know anything about the government here, as well as the police, we do know that they would be working, they would be carrying out their investigations, and they would definitely be on a hunt to get these individuals. And I'm sure that when they do have something to tell us, they would make that statement. But for now, there's been no official statement.
So does this change the current status of employee visas for Nigerians in the UAE and the issuance of other types of visas?
The suspension is still on at this time, and we do hope that it would be lifted sooner rather than later. It's quite unfortunate that this has happened, and it did happen last year. Just about this time, if you remember, that there was a hush puppy incident where he was arrested about this time last year. And then shortly afterwards, we experienced something similar. So I have my fingers crossed that this suspension would be lifted in time when they, come to the realization that there are many other Nigerians who are doing well and adding to the economy over here. We're not all the same.
Right, so just for clarification, Mayowa, you said that, the government has not said so much about this. Are you saying that no Nigerian was involved in the cultist clash in Sharjah?
Oh, definitely Nigerians were involved in that clash, because from the videos that we've seen men speaking in a Nigerian language. So definitely Nigerians are involved. And of course, speaking to Nigerians in that area who do confirm that these activities do go on. And a lot of people know that these things happen. So it's not a surprise, and there's no doubt that there are cultists doing all sorts in the area.
So let's get back to the visa ban. So far as this ban has gone, how is it impacting on Nigerians living in the UAE?
I can tell you for a fact that a lot of young Nigerians career professionals are bearing the brunt of this suspension. I know at least 3 individuals who are just about to change jobs, and that means that they would need to obtain new work permits for the new jobs they've got, but now they are stuck at this point. And ultimately what that means is if you're not able to get a work permit and you're not able to get a job because no employer will take you on without you being able to get that permit, in the matter of a month from quitting your other job, you would technically become an illegal resident and would need to vacate the country, except you opt for another type of visa, say a tourist visa, for instance. So a lot of young Nigerians who have been doing well over here, who are really, flying the flag high and proudly, are caught in the mix. And we do hope that the UAE government would turn around and lift this suspension for the sake of the good ones, who are far more than the bad eggs.
Right, thank you so much, Mayowa. Thanks again for that, and to stay safe.
Thank you.
Israel's new government today faced its biggest defeat in parliament, failing to renew a controversial law that prevents Palestinians living in the West Bank and Gaza Strip who marry Israeli citizens from gaining citizenship themselves. It was the first major political test for Prime Minister Bennett, who for nearly a month now has been heading a narrow and diverse coalition that includes left-wing, centrist and Arab parties, along with his own ultra-nationalist party. He came up short in the early morning vote, failing to secure a simple majority in Parliament to extend the so-called citizenship and entry into Israel law and underscoring his government's fragility. The vote was tied at 59 to 59. The law prevents Palestinians living in the occupied West Bank and Gaza Strip who marry Israeli citizens from automatically gaining Israeli residency and citizenship, although exceptions are made on a case-by-case basis. Israel first passed the law in 2003 during the height of a Palestinian uprising, saying Palestinians who married Israeli citizens used their legal status to help carry out attacks against Israel. And at a height of 21.16 meters, 3.5 meters higher than the previous record holder, the world's new tallest sandcastle was unveiled in Denmark last week. The sandcastle, built in Blokhus in northwest Denmark, broke the Guinness World Record on July the 2nd, previously held by a sandcastle made in Germany in 2019, which was 17.66 meters. Dutch designer Wilfred Stitjer said the corona pandemic had inspired his sandcastle. At the top of the castle, he put a coronavirus bacteria as a crown to illustrate how the virus is ruling our world and not allowing us to do what we want to do.
Yes, we started with Corona on top, and we give it a crown because Corona means crown. It's like nice and double, but we give it also a crown because it's ruling our lives everywhere. It tells you what to do. It tells you to wear a mouth protection. It tells you to, to stay away from your family and not go to the nice places. Don't do the activities. Stay home. It's 2116 meters, and it's 3 meters higher than the previous one.
That's the world today. Thank you for watching. I'm Joker Rogers.